Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Carrie. I am City Market's Assistant Outreach and Education Manager. I'm the one who's been sending you all of those emails, so now you get to put a face to a name, or at least half a face at this point. We are so excited to welcome you in today for our Firesider live stream demo. We will be doing a slideshow portion first, and then we're going to move into the demo portion. There is a question and answer box, so if at any time during the demo or the slides you have questions, you can put those into that Q&A box. I will see them, and we're probably going to hold most of the questions for the end after we're done the demo portion. So I'm sure you're all going to have tons of great questions, and Kara will be happy to answer them, but we're going to hold most of them to the end. So just letting you know that I do see them. They will be coming, no worries. Without further ado, I think I'll turn things over to Kara. I'll be behind the scenes, so you'll hear me asking questions out to Kara, but you won't see me. So this is the only time you'll see me. Again, welcome so much. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming, and we're excited to get started. Here, take it away.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm psyched to share this with you guys today. One of my favorite herbal remedies to teach about because it is so endless, the possibilities and the personalizations where you can take it. I'm also going to talk about it in the context of winter immunity. And so I'm going to share a slideshow and then we'll get into it and making it. So my name is Kara Buchanan. I am co-director of Spoonful Herbals, and this is our mission statement. We're a nonprofit organization rooted in our deep love and respect for plants and wild places, our reverence for the human body and spirit, and our joy for sharing our work and creations with the world. It's our mission to share joyful, hands-on education and wellness through plant medicine while honoring all our herbal traditions. Our approach is rooted in sharing a sense of place, nurturing curiosity and creativity, inspiring ecological stewardship, and growing wellness sovereignty for individuals and communities. We foster community action to enhance equitable access to the abundance of seasonal local plant medicine, to build resilience, and to promote the practice of the honorable harvest. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Spoonful also before we get into wellness sovereignty. My co-director is Catherine Elmer, and one of our favorite things that we do as an organization is we teach a 6-month herbal apprenticeship, which is all about getting people in touch with learning to ID all the abundant medicinal plants in our landscape in Vermont during the green season, of course, and learning everything and anything to do with them as far as food and medicine goes. One of the key aspects of our mission statement that I referenced is this idea of wellness sovereignty. And some of you City Market foodies have probably heard the term food sovereignty, and we have kind of absorbed that into our whole idea of eat local, grow local, and heal local. And wellness sovereignty basically being the access of all people to the knowledge, land, producers, and personal skill building to harvest, heal, and nourish oneself with local, abundant, wild, and cultivated food and medicinal plants. To know local plants and how to use them appropriately, to create one's own medicine and nourishment with them, and also how to access locally produced quality wellness products from quality local sources and producers, all while stewarding these farms and natural plant populations, protecting species at risk of overharvest. So we're all about wellness sovereignty at City Market here as well. City Market and Spoonful Herbals is something we share. And so I'm proud to say that most of what we're going to make our Firesider out of today is from local ingredients. And I'm also going to talk about how to grow some of these, as that brings the circle full circle. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Carrie. All right, before we even get into the herbal piece of things, I just want to talk about the basics of winter wellness. And the first and foremost, before we even get to herbs and food, is building and maintaining a foundation of wellness. Next. And these might all be might seem self-explanatory and obvious, but it always bears reminding that not only does our nutrition include nourishing whole foods, but we also have to have healthy digestion in order to absorb the nourishment of our foods. And we have to keep really well hydrated, which of course is harder in the winter months. And that's not only about drinking lots of water, that's about not drinking things that dry us out, like caffeinated beverages, and also having plenty of healthy oils and fats in our diet to keep us hydrated. Rest. This one we all know, this one can't be overemphasized enough. It's often when we're stressed and lacking sleep that we get sick, right? So rest is paramount. And then supportive relationships as well. This has been a really hard road through this pandemic, feeling isolated, navigating video and in places that we're used to being able to do in person, like hugs. You can't do those yet on video. So this has been a stressful time and can, in all stressful times, lead to sickness and disease. Next. Then we get into herbal strategies. And so the two basic ways that herbal strategies are going to help us through the cold and flu season is one, to support and engage your body's defense system, and two, to provide relief from symptoms when you get them. So 3 different ways of the herbs interacting would be barriers, which is where masks and hand sanitizers come in. You may know that this has been the lightest flu season this country has had in years, and it's because we're all using masks and hand sanitizers and social distancing. So these are something made obvious, and extremely obvious. Tissue tonics are something I won't go into a whole lot, but when the air is dry and your mucous membranes in your nose, your eyes, your mouth are dry, that's when viruses and bacteria can take hold. So keeping your tissues moistened, whether through herbs and hydration, is important. And then disabling pathogens. So 3 different ways of doing that. Excuse me, it's hard when you talk and you're constantly pointing down. Antimicrobial herbs. So antimicrobial herbs are exactly what you think they are. Microbes can include bacteria, viruses, fungus, protozoa, and different herbs are going to have different affinities for helping with all of those different kind of critters. And what else do I want to say about that one? Get to my notes here. Oh, one of the most interesting things about antimicrobial herbs is how many of them are the culinary herbs that we're all familiar with. So when we get into talking about what we're going to put into our fireside, we'll talk some more about that. But it makes sense because those herbs have been used since long before there was refrigeration to protect us against food spoilage and ingested foodborne pathogens. Then there are the immune boosting herbs, and these are the herbs that you can take when you feel something coming on and you really want to kickstart your immune system into action to help fend off whatever's attacking you. And some of the ones you might be familiar with are echinacea or spilanthes or garlic. And we'll talk more about those as they relate to fire cider. Then there are the immune building herbs, which include actions in herbs like tonics, which means they're building your system, or there's adaptogens, which are more broad and not necessarily just about your immunity, but just helping to strengthen the whole system. And then there is a whole nother group of herbs, which are sometimes tonics and adaptogens as well, which are called immunomodulants. And these are magical herbs that can actually modify things. So in the case of cancer, for instance, cancer or autoimmune disease, where your immune system is overreacting. They can actually tone that down, while at the same time, if you're coming down with the flu, they're able to, or fending off the flu over the season. Immunomodulants are something you take over a much longer period of time. All of these immune building herbs, adaptogens, tonics, immunomodulants are something you're taking for the long term to help your immunity. We've got a picture of some beautiful shiitake mushroom soup there. A lot of the medicinal mushrooms are fabulous tonics, adaptogens, and immunomodulants. And you, aside from fire saver and what we talk about today, as far as your winter health immunity, these are some of the best foods, medicinal foods that you can add into your diet during the winter to fend things off, particularly when you're not masked and sanitizing. So fire ciders, what we're going to make today, and I don't know if you guys can see what I have here. We'll focus in on it a little later. But we have our ginger, we have our onion, we have our cayenne, our garlic, and our horseradish. These are pungent herbs. I mean, think about putting fresh garlic in your mouth, which is something you probably have all done. It is pungent, it is intense, it's spicy, even when it's fresh and in quantity, whereas if you're cooking it in something that kind of tones it down. I don't know how many of you have ever had horseradish straight up, but boy, that's a kicker. Most people are familiar with the action of horseradish through wasabi. So wasabi is the fun little green horseradish paste that you get with sushi, and it just goes straight to your sinuses, doesn't it? It's not a lasting heat like something hot pepper on your tongue, but it is so good at energizing your sinuses. And so that is one that is really a great, of all of the things in this recipe, is the most symptom specific because it really clears up a stuffy nose, just really, really gets things moving. But I'll come back to some of the actions of that as we get into making it and what we're putting in it and why. So the other pieces that are going into it are apple cider vinegar. Could you use some other kind of fruit vinegar? Yeah, you probably could. Some of you might be interested or have experience with making your own apple cider vinegar at home. And you can do it from other fruits as well. So those are definitely game for this, but you want nice raw apple cider, and of course, local is best. And the same with your honey. You want raw honey. Raw honey has all of the natural enzymes still intact. Not when things are heated in honey, it destroys all those natural enzymes, which are wonderful for your digestion. And also heating honey changes this sugar, the fructose in the honey, into something that is more akin to high fructose corn syrup. So not healthy. Heated honey is not healthy for you. The preparation that we're doing is called an oxymel, which is basically an old herbal name. I can't tell you exactly where it came from. That is a vinegar infusion with honey in it. So they're all going to be vinegar and honey. Okay, so the back to the cold and flu defense system, the fire cider is addressing the disabled pathogens path with antimicrobial herbs and immune boosting herbs. Now this is the basic recipe. You could also be adding immune building herbs into your fire cider, but the main reason that this recipe was developed was to be this sharp, hot, spicy, get your immune system cranking kind of thing. So one of my favorite parts when I usually teach this class in person is to hand you all some and watch some of you try it for the first time. Darn, we don't get to do that. But you're all going to make a batch, I hope. I hope everybody, by the way, had a chance to print out the recipe that Carrie sent, because it'll be easier for you to follow along and make some notes once we get into it. Okay. This lovely lady in the middle is Rosemary Gladstar, renowned herbal formulator and Vermont-based author, activist, teacher, and mentor, and the creator of Fire Cider. I was lucky to do most of my herbal studies with Rosemary. I completed the advanced herbal training back in 2001. That was a while ago. But she's been doing it a lot longer than that, and she's still doing it. There is such a lineage of herbalists in our region who've been trained by Rosemary. And as I said, she created this recipe. I had a short video I was going to share with you, but I'm going to tell you the story in short as what instead, because Carrie and I aren't sure if we can do that.
Yeah, I'll send the link to the video after class tomorrow with the survey link, but yeah, I don't think it would work technology-wise to try to show a video to everybody. We'd probably damage your eardrums. So we'll do that. You can watch it on your own time.
So Rosemary created this recipe with some friends back when she had started the California School of Herbal Studies. Back in the late 70s, she says, and they created it for winter health, and they were basing it on several very old herbal tonics and some newly popularized versions of the theme, such as Dr. Jarvis's apple cider vinegar tonic, Dr. Christopher's hot apple cider vinegar and cayenne toddy, and the popular Four Thieves vinegar, which was allegedly used by 4 graveyard robbers in the Middle Ages to prevent them from getting the plague, which it obviously did for a while because they were running rampant. So it became famous. And then there was something else that was being cooked up at the time called cyclone cider. So this was their take on it, and knowing everything that they knew about the medicinal plants that are involved, they created this great remedy, which is a standard in any herb school, particularly anyone from Rosemary's lineage. Everybody learns how to make fire cider. And I have to say, having taught it to many people in the past, it's kind of one of everybody's favorites. It's just really fun to make, and we usually make it at harvest time in the late summer when the hot peppers are in season and the onions are coming out of the ground and the horseradish is ready. Traditionally, roots like horseradish are harvested after the fall equinox. So that kind of gives you an idea of, that late September time. The movie I was going to share was a little bit about the tradition versus trademark debate, which is just fire cider lore now. And I'm happy to say that what was a long legal battle that went from about 2016 until last year was won. And that's where a business called Shire City Herbals created a fire cider recipe of their own and trademarked the name. Now, fire cider, like I said, is taught in every herb school of Rosemary's lineage. Everybody makes it. You would go to any farmer's market and herbalists were selling their version of it. And all of a sudden, this name was trademarked and all of these small herbalists were being sent cease and desist orders. So Rosemary got the herbal community rallied to fight this trademark because, as she said, that's like taking the name tea or the name pizza and trademarking it. So it's not about not everybody being able to come with their own formulas and having the right to trademark them, but not to be able to take away a classic remedy understood as fire cider. I wanted to share the one picture I have there is Yerbury Master Tonic, and that is sold here at City Market if you don't have some made up at home. And Michaela Grubbs, who's the formulator for that company, is also taught by Rosemary and runs her business out of Charlotte. So shout out to Michaela. All right, then we have the video. So freefirecider.com was a site that was created to rally the herbal community during this, fighting this trademark. And if you're interested in learning more about it or watching this 5-minute video, check it out. So now it's about making your own fire cider. And I've got our little Wellness Sovereignty rose fist up there because, and one of the reasons I wanted to share that video is just to rally you up a little bit, like that this is powerful and that this is something you can take into your own hands, take your health into your own hands and make fabulous medicine from all the ingredients that we have available to us at where we live in fabulous Vermont, with fabulous farms and the fabulous city market. So I've had fun picking out pictures there of what yours could look like. I love the colorful ones, and I'm going to talk a lot about like all the various things that you could put in to add to this basic recipe. But as in all things, it's always good to start to learn with the basics. So
we're going to switch camera views so that hopefully we can see you full screen. There we go. You are full screen. Everybody can see you.
All right, sweet. I can't see myself though, but that's okay.
No.
Okay. So I'm just looking at some of my notes, and I went over quickly a lot of, you know, I could talk a lot more about different immune tonics and things, but I think I'm just going to choose to come back to that to the end. People, again, can put things in the chat box, and we'll talk about more about the specifics of what you might want to put in your fire cider. So I hope everyone can see what I have in front of me here. I've been chopping away. I was really glad that I did this before getting on camera with you because these tend to make your eyes water between the onions and the horseradish in particular. And I chopped all of these by hand, roughly. My general advice is to kind of make everything about the same size, but smaller is always better when you're infusing things because there's more surface area to be in contact with the menstruum, which is what you call the liquid that you're adding. Just to give you herbal terms, just for the heck of it, what you're putting in the jar as herbal material is called the marc, and the liquid that you add to it is called the menstruum. And our menstruum today, of course, is apple cider vinegar. So if you've got your recipe in front of you, this is Rosemary's original fire cider recipe. And it says here that it makes a quart. But I cut more than that. So I'm going to make a 1/2 gallon jar today. And as I'm going to continue to say through this whole thing, this is just guidelines. I know some people love recipes and they like things to be exact. Well, here you go, if that's what you'd like. But it's really my style and my intention to encourage you to get really creative. So when it says a 1/2 cup of grated horseradish, 1/2 cup of onions, 1/4 cup of garlic, 1/4 cup of ginger, I take that to mean 1 part ginger, 1 part garlic, 2 parts horseradish, 2 parts onions. I hope that makes sense. And it's just eyeballing it once you've got it cut. It's hard to eyeball, like Carrie was talking about. You know, I gave her the recipe and she gave me the raw ingredients because you never know what it's going to look like when you chop it down. So,
I got way too much ginger, like way too much ginger, because I'm always really bad at judging how much it grates down.
I think that's also because Carrie really likes ginger and she wanted to make sure there was nothing in there.
That's it.
So no, there's a rule there. I mean, if you love the taste of ginger, add more of it because there's a lot of other strong flavors in here to compete with. So we've got everything chopped, and that's when once everything is chopped and roughly the same size, then you can get more of a sense of parts. So some of those pictures that I showed you earlier, people really have fun, like layering their colors and things, and so that's fun to do. But in general, what I do is I do like to do layers. So I'm going to do onions and horseradish first. I'm going to do a layer of ginger, layer of garlic, and keep doing it. Kind of like making a lasagna or something. Oh, the other piece that I have in here is lemon. And I added a lot more lemon that was called for in the recipe because I guess that's what I want to have in it. So
Craving that sunny vitamin C taste.
yeah,
In this
so
weather.
it's so fresh. So that's another thing that we didn't really talk about. We talked about the pungentness of some of these herbs. Let me talk a little bit more about each of them. So we know onions. Onions are just strong and related to the garlic. Everything in the allium family has the same kind of pungency, and they're all good additions. You could put leeks and scallions and things like that in your fire cider if you wanted to too. But these nice yellow onions, or I find even purple Burmina onions are really spicy. So any kind of onion is really game. Ginger, you probably know some of the medicinal qualities of ginger in that it is great antimicrobial. It's good for the heart. And I would ask you all, and it also has an affinity to the lungs. And you know this from when you've had too much, there's no such thing as too much garlic, when you've had a lot of garlic and you are just breathing like a dragon the next day. That's because all of that garlic medicine is actually going into the tissue of your lungs, and so you're expelling that in your breath. So garlic is great for the lungs. The other thing that we don't have fresh that we'll be adding, which is a critical ingredient, is cayenne pepper. And we have some dried chili flakes here to add. So chili and ginger are particularly circulatory stimulants. So these are also immune stimulants, as I mentioned earlier. But they also work as circulatory stimulants. And if you think about that, if you added them to any herbal recipe that you were making, they're just going to get it going through your body faster. So that's one of the roles that they play in this formula. And then I did talk a little bit about how horseradish goes straight to your sinuses. So it is really great at getting things moving when you have upper respiratory.
Someone asks, you definitely do the full lemon slices, not just the zest.
Definitely. You're going to find different recipes out there, and the lemon, why we're adding the lemon, is vitamin C. So vitamin C is critical to your immune system, and particularly when you're fighting a cold. So citrus is a fabulous thing to add, and some people like to add a lot of citrus. And you could also add other citruses. Grapefruit's really popular, and oranges. There's a lot of recipes that have a blend of lime, lemon, and oranges. So get creative, whatever is your favorite flavor, but add plenty of it. Sometimes people add fresh lemon juice to the end of the product too, when you're mixing it all together. So as I was talking about doing layers, I am going to layer things, and I'm not going to measure too specifically, except that I am going to talk a little bit about adding cayenne. If I was making this in the late summer, or even if I came to City Market and I wanted to buy fresh peppers to add, while I may be tearing up because I'm cutting all these pungent things, cayenne pepper is a whole nother ball of wax. So I always use plastic gloves, or maybe an old plastic bag that might be a little hard to work with. But the problem with getting fresh pepper juice on your hands is it really soaks in, and you may think, oh, I can handle this. This is no big deal. And 3 hours later, it's really excruciating. Or you're getting it in your eye or some other private place, and you just really want to be careful. There's such magical, potent medicine, but just be careful. So some of the other pieces that are fun to add are flavors. And I talked about how a lot of these culinary herbs are also highly antimicrobial. So some of my favorites to include in the culinary herb realm are rosemary. And what do we have here today? Rosemary and thyme. So I'm definitely going to add some of those. And again, if I was making this in the late fall, which I'd encourage you to, if you get in the rhythm of making this, to really enjoy making some in the late fall when you can get fresh plants from your garden or the farmer's market, and make a big batch of it so that you have it put away for the whole winter. Some of the other really popular things to add are things like turmeric. So turmeric is something I take almost every day for its anti-inflammatory aspects. It's also almost considered an adaptogen. And I talked a little bit about adaptogens being just general health tonics to just bring your quality of life throughout your different body systems up. And there's something that you can take daily. Whereas some of these antimicrobial stimulant herbs are really made to kick your immune system into action, but not necessarily something you want to take every day. Now, on that note, some people love to take fire cider almost every day during the cold season. If I were someone like Carrie, who was coming into a busy city market where I'm exposed to lots of people and lots of germs and stuff, this would be a fabulous ally. So a lot of people really enjoy doing that. I am bouncing all over the place, but I wanted to talk some more about some of the things you might like to put in your fire cider. Before I forget, and I'll show this again, this is a book that Rosemary wrote a year or two ago during the trial case. It was a fundraiser and just a way to celebrate fire cider and all the herbalists and all the different recipes they make. And so if you want to really geek out about fire cider, everything is in here, and everything about like vinegar medicine and all the things you could possibly make out of vinegar. And I will get to the end about talking about how all the different fabulous ways to use your fire cider vinegar. But there are so many routes you could go down as far as what you really want to add to your medicine, or maybe what you have available. So some of the plants that we often add to our fire cider based on what's in season and what we're harvesting are some of the adaptogenic roots like ashwagandha or astragalus, eleuthero, which is also known as Siberian ginseng, cottonopsis, which is another root that's also known as poor man's ginseng and is easily grown in gardens in Vermont. So I grow that one and I like to add that one. Then there are some things like tulsi, which is holy basil. So when you think about adding these green flavors, tulsi basil or holy basil is in the basil family. So it has a kind of a basil-y licoricey flavor, which is really lovely. Licorice itself as a root is also a good addition, and is a good, all of these that I'm mentioning are adaptogenic tonic herbs. So once you've got the basic ready, the recipe that's covering the stimulants, and you're somebody who likes to take your fire cider every day to stay healthy, adding some of these tonics and adaptogenic herbs would be a great addition for you. Or you might want to go completely down the flavor route. So you could go on the sweeter side. So we were talking about how Carrie loves ginger, but she doesn't really like hot pepper. So maybe she could go down a route where she did something more along the curry flavors, where she could add turmeric, she could add things like cinnamon and allspice and cloves and cardamom. And a lot of those curry spices are specific to the digestive system, so they could be helpful there. And I talked about turmeric being good for inflammation. And then when we go back to this whole vitamin C piece, there are a lot of different options besides citrus. For instance, Spoonful Herbals, because we like to do everything hyper-local, some of our favorite additions for vitamin C are sumac berries from the staghorn sumac that grows everywhere, and rose hips from rose bushes. Almost all of your landscaping roses are edible. And so as long as they're not being subjected to pesticides and things, rose hips are a fabulous source of vitamin C. But then think about all the fruits and vegetables that are also high in vitamin C, like berries. Why not put your blackberries in there? Or elderberries are a classic. Herbalists love their elderberries. And both elderflower and elderberry are immune tonics. So again, you're adding that tonic piece, and elderberry is antiviral. So you're adding more antimicrobial. So elderberries are going to make this dark, beautiful red fire cider. They're going to add vitamin C, and they're going to add their antiviral benefits.
Is there anything that you've ever put in the fire cider that was a big flop that just either doesn't work with the vinegar infusion method, or just really was like, ooh, I'm not going to do that one again? Or has everything pretty much been like, yep, that's interesting?
Well, you have to get your head around the fact that these flavors are so strong that whatever else you add to it is really going to be overpowered by that strength and how you like to take it. Like when I take my fire cider, I don't sip it. I like to put it in a shot glass and down it. Carrie was talking about how she likes to put it in hot water. And the whole thing is meant to be warming. One of the things that these plants do is, I talked about the circulatory stimulant piece. They are warming you up. This will, if you take, which is one of the reasons why I love to be able to give it to participants right here and there. When you have that fire cider, you just feel it like radiate down your esophagus, and then you feel it radiating out everywhere. Have you ever had something like food that was really spicy and actually makes your forehead break out in a sweat? Well, that's the action of those circulatory stimulants. So veering off into just how it reacts with people, this is a really hot thing. And so people who run hot, or people like me who tend to like flush easily, this can like really exacerbate that. So maybe I'm not somebody who takes it every day, but I would definitely reach for fire cider when I came in from being outdoors and I was chilled. It's fabulous for that. Or when I felt like I was coming down with something, or I felt like I was just exposed to germy people, or I knew I had been stressed and not getting enough sleep and just getting at risk of getting sick. So it's a wonderful go-to remedy, but it's not for everybody for every day. If we go back to, let's see, I think I covered a lot. Oh, I did want to talk about mushrooms. We talked about mushrooms as being just fabulous immune tonics and adaptogens and just great allies during the winter. You really should find ways to include them in your diet. The thing is that the best way to get mushroom medicine is to really cook them slowly and long. And their medicinal constituents just aren't going to come out well in a vinegar infusion. So they are not good. They're not good ideas to put in your fire cider, only because you'd be wasting your medicine, their medicine in your fire cider. It just doesn't, it doesn't extract.
I think we might have one or two people on this event who took Catherine's mushroom medicine class, where she talked about the alcohol and the hot water extraction.
Yes,
versus vinegar.
Good.
Yeah.
She didn't mention vinegar, did she?
No. No.
There are some fabulous powders that are made from mushrooms that are already steam distilled and or steam extracted, so that they're as powder form. They're very viable. Something like that could go into your fire cider if you were really jonesing to put mushrooms in, but that would be the only way that I would do it. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. All right, I'll leave the, when we get to questions, how are we doing on time?
It's 6:10, we've got 20 minutes left.
Okay.
So, yep, if people have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat.
Yeah, if you have questions about different actions of herbs and different combinations of what we might add, go ahead and start putting those in the chat box. What else did I want to cover? Well, I'm just going to start putting things in here. I hope I have given you some good guidance about getting creative and following flavors. I'm just going to start adding things now. So I didn't add any thyme yet. And we're just going to keep layering things in here.
It smells really good in this kitchen already, I will say that. I wish people could be here to smell it and taste it, like you said. Like, it's just so pungent in here.
Ginger.
Yes.
Good.
My eyes are very sensitive to onions, and I always can tell when we're doing an onion-based cooking recipe in this kitchen, and I'm just like, oh, it's so good, and yet, ow.
It's just, it gives you a real sense of how strong these herbs are, right?
Yeah, we are spaced very far apart, and I'm still like, oh, my eyes.
Yeah. So this whole thing is going to get infused into the vinegar, and we're going to end up taking, squeezing everything out and reserving just the vinegar. I am going to talk about all the things you can do with all this yummy stuff. I mean, that you're going to end up taking out. So don't throw it away. You don't want to throw away all this stuff. There are so many, you can compost it. Don't throw it away, compost it. If that's as far as you want to get with your fire cider, but I just wanted you to know that the investment in all of these plants and all your chopping has further use. So we're making this one for Carrie, so I'm not going to put any more hot peppers in there. So this is a little too full for this jar. So I'm going to put some of it in the other jar. So in so many herbal infusions like this of all sorts, whether we're putting them in water or alcohol or water, alcohol, vinegar, the basic premise is the same. We use a lot of canning jars. My husband will tell you.
Sure, finally
He
coming
says,
back into stock.
how many jars does a woman need? Okay. So it's easy to get carried away and overfill your jar, but then you wouldn't have much room for the vinegar. And then if you think about it, and you're taking all this stuff out and using the vinegar is left. If I fill this all the way up, the vinegar just can't absorb all that goodness. It can only absorb so much. And you really want to have, in all things, whenever you're putting herb, you want to have enough of the menstruum, which is the liquid, to make sure everything stays submerged, because anything that's floating on the top is subject to mold. So this is about right. Rosemary says ever so technically in her recipe, just make sure you have enough for 3 or 4 inches. You could also say that this is about 2/3 to 3/4 full. So we're going to pour vinegar on there. I wanted to recommend this one that's sold at City Market, but we're going to start using up what we got here. But this is Dwight Miller Orchards, which is transitional organic, and they're out of what, Dummerston? Yeah, East Dummerston, Vermont.
It's so cool to me that we have a local apple cider vinegar. Like, I'm from Delaware originally, and just the idea of like there being someone that makes apple cider vinegar it's just a grocery store thing, a basic thing. And then here it's like, no, we have a local apple cider vinegar maker.
I've been making my own apple cider vinegar and going to Shelburne Orchards when they have their drop days.
Nice. Collecting
drop apples. It's a long process. It's basically like making wine. So first it turns to alcohol, and then you expose it to air and it turns to vinegar. And there's actually a great recipe about how to make your own fruit vinegar from either whole apples or from scraps in this book. And I believe that one is written by Kristen Shockey, who's a famous fermenter and also has a lot of books and online courses and stuff. So if you want to learn how to make your own apple cider vinegar. All right. So things are going to float. I mean, look at, right, things want to float. What does happen is after the first week or so, things are going to kind of absorb more of the vinegar and they will sink a little bit. But the real key to dealing with that is to put this somewhere out of direct sunlight, but put it right on your kitchen counter. That's where I put all of my herbal things. You know, a lot of recipes will say, you know, put it in a dark closet somewhere, but then you won't see it every day and you'll forget about it. And one of the best things that you can do is once a day is shake it up so that if there's any of that stuff that's floating on the top, you're moving it around. And that way you can be sure that. So you can tell now that I've filled this up. Maybe I didn't take enough out of it. It's pretty full.
It'll just be extra strength.
This is a perennial issue. I always put so much in it.
Do you recommend the parchment paper underneath the lid?
Yes.
Thing? Yeah.
So vinegar is corrosive to metal. So maybe you have some of those plastic storage lids that they have for mason jars at home, but if you don't, just a piece of parchment or wax paper or saran wrap, an old plastic bag, something like that that you can just wrap under the.
I'll do that at home so I don't risk it spilling in the car.
Yeah, and it takes weeks for that to happen, so don't stress about it if you don't do it right away.
You get to have a jar for yourself now.
Yes, I guess I'll take a little home.
We have a couple of questions coming in. I don't know if you want to take them now.
Yeah, might as well start. I think that's, I should talk a little bit about dosage. Why don't I just talk about that? Because people will have a lot of questions.
Sure, yeah. We're going to go back to the slide view. So give us 1 second. We'll switch back to the slides and then we'll talk about dosing and storage. Let's see if this will go. There we go.
Okay. So there it says the famous infamous tonic known and used for generations to boost immune response and encourage speedy recovery from colds and flus or to prevent them in the first place. So if I was taking this daily as just part of my supplements to keep healthy, I'd just take a teaspoon or two. And if I was taking a teaspoon or two and I didn't want that, like say I was taking this in the morning before I went to work and I didn't want that like bam of stimulant and heat, just put it in water. Diluting it is just not affect its effectiveness. But if you really wanted to bump it up a bit, you could add it to hot water. So adding that heat of the hot water would be a way to kind of bump it up. So in that case, you would take a full tablespoon at the onset of a cold or a flu and mix it with that hot water and take that several times a day. I usually say like 3 to more like 5 times a day because the thing with immune stimulants is they need you to keep doing it. So if you're really in the trying to fight something off, it's about taking it more regularly. It's not about downing a whole half cup of it at once. It's about spreading that out over the day to get that immune system boosting. And before I get to questions, the last thing I'll talk about is how yummy this is. Straight up, this basic recipe is delicious. It's kind of like pickly, if you like, or maybe you're one of those people who likes to drink the pickle juice from the jar when it's done. You know, it's spicy and it's very vinegary, and it has so many culinary uses. It is fabulous as a salad dressing. It's fabulous in Bloody Marys. Think about it. It's got that horseradish and all that spice in it. One of my favorite ways to try it most recently was as a topping on fresh oysters. OMG.
Did you just do the liquid, or did you actually scoop out some of like the onion and the garlic? And
the fresh shucked oyster, I just poured a
Nice.
teaspoon of horseradish on top, and it's really good. And one of our favorite things to make out of our fire cider, sometimes when we have extra of it, a spoonful, is a homemade honey mustard. So a homemade honey mustard recipe is made with mustard seeds that are soaked in vinegar. So we use this in place of the vinegar and just adds all that flavor to it. So this is going to go home. Well, this is going to go home with Carrie. And it's going to sit on her counter for 4 to 6 weeks, where she can take a check on it and shake it and make sure nothing's getting moldy. Do take your top off every once in a while and make sure. And if something is starting, if you're doing this every day or two and you're on top of it, don't freak out. Just scoop off what looks bad and carry on. And the fact is, it's vinegar. It's really not going to get moldy, except if those things are popping up above. So that's the most important thing you can do, is just to make sure that things aren't sticking. When that 4 to 6 weeks is over, you're going to strain it out. The easiest way to do that, and I could have brought demonstration, but you can visualize. I usually will take the largest Pyrex measuring cup that I have, and I'll put a regular sieve inside there, just the classic kind you would fine mesh sieve that you might strain noodles in. Put that over and lay some kind of cloth in there. It can be a cloth that you could reuse, like cheesecloth. Cheesecloth is the best example to give you. So just lay some clean cheesecloth in there. Pour all this in there. Let the liquid strain out, and then wrap that up and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze so that you get all that vinegar out. Then using a Pyrex measuring cup is helpful, but also mason jars are great because they have all these measuring things on it. So you might just pour it back into a clean mason jar, or the one that you just used, you rinsed out. And then you'll be able to see how much you have left. So say I've strained this out and my vinegar comes up to here. I'll be able to guesstimate about what a third is. So the basic guidelines I'm offering you is to start with adding about a third of honey. So you're not adding the honey until after this is all infused for the 4 to 6 weeks, strained. Then you're adding the honey to taste. Now there's something to be said for not adding honey at all. Try it. When it comes to making salad dressings out of it, it doesn't necessarily need the honey. My partner, Catherine, swears that she thinks it keeps better if you don't put the honey in it. But I find that my fire cider with honey in it, unrefrigerated, lasts a long time. I do suppose there are situations where maybe you're adding so much fruit and liquid to it, like think of all that orange juice you would be adding from your citrus or all the elderberries, that maybe you're bringing this acidity level over in the overall thing. It's just going down to a percentage where it's a little more apt to go bad. So just keep it in the fridge. But honey itself is a preservative too, so I find it's very shelf stable. But best to keep it someplace cool and dark if you can. Okay, I think I'm ready. I think I've covered everything that I hoped to. Why don't I take some questions?
Yeah, sure. Now is the perfect time for people to put any final questions into the chat. I only have a few to get through, so if you're furiously typing away, let me know, and I will wait for you and let you ask your question. Someone says, I jumped the gun and followed the first ingredient list that was sent out, which only listed ingredients, not what to do with them, because I had sent the version that we talked about of just the list of here's what you'll need as a demo, and then I sent yours.
Oh, yeah.
I already put all the ingredients together, including the honey. Will that be a problem? Like if they let it sit?
It will not be a problem. Okay. It will not. However, you might feel like it's too sweet or not sweet enough. So I guess it'd be easy to add more honey if you wanted to. I think it's kind of a good educational part of this process is to taste it without the honey first. It's pretty pungent, but it's just part of just getting a sense of the flavors. Oh, I know. I had another, I talked about the pro tips. So whoever this is will want to look at the handout that you sent afterwards. But a couple of the pro tips that I talked about, one was what Carrie recommended about putting a plastic top or cover and the corrosive. Another is to consider making a jar of your hot peppers separately, particularly if you're using, fresh hot peppers, so they, take up more space in the jar. Because then when you're putting it all together at the end, you can just be adding it to taste. Sometimes people are just really, they just don't care for that really spicy stuff. Or maybe you want to make a couple versions for the hotheads and the not hotheads. So that's just something to think about doing separately. I'll talk about the chutney. So I talked about not throwing away the marc after you have strained it out. Depending on what you put in it, I will say that rose hips are not a very nice texture. So I actually often make rose hip vinegar separately. So that's something I would also make separately, like the hot peppers, and I could be adding it. Because when you get to this marc, all of these things have a nice texture. And what I like to do is put them through the food processor to make them a little finer so that maybe they're like the texture of pickle relish. And we've done some fun additions of flavors to that too. We've added more fruit. One we made where we added more lemon and dried apricots. And it was fabulous. It was really good. Other times I've just added some honey to it because it already has so many fabulous flavors. And it just, think of it like a chutney or a relish you could add to things. You can add it to sauces. I make a lot of sauces to drizzle over roasted vegetables and roasted chicken. Yum. You'll just, once you have it in your kitchen, you'll find ways to use it, and I think you'll be really pleased. Another thing I did with it once was lay it out in my dehydrator, dried it crisp, and then powdered it up. And it became a yummy seasoning for things, kind of a seasoning salt, or it was good on popcorn. So a good way not to waste things. And I will say that fire cider is one of the few things that I really do make by mixing a lot of things up in the same jar. As an herbalist, I tend to make a jar of this and a jar of this and a jar of this, and then mix them all together at the end. So there's nothing wrong with putting the best of both worlds together there and making maybe just ginger. I mean, just having just ginger vinegar to add to other things is a great thing, and that way you can just kind of tweak your recipe.
I do a really ginger heavy one sometimes when I make it, and then I do raisins in the chutney part, and it's really good on Indian food because it's almost like an Indian chutney already. It's really good.
Yes, yes.
Meg asks, what about using a food processor? Also, how long will the finished fire cider keep? Which you sort of already touched on pretty much.
I've had it around for years sometimes. You know how raw vinegar has a mother, and sometimes that will kind of, make it kind of eats up your vinegar in a way. I find that these pungent herbs, when they're added to it, it stops. I think it kind of perhaps it kills off the mother just because there's just so many potent herbs in there. So I don't have the problem with the mother, and I find it keeps really long.
Especially in the fridge, forever in the fridge, basically.
But it's one of those things you're going to be really excited when you make it, and everybody who comes over, you're gonna have them try it, and it's going to be your go-to. It's just one of the beautiful things. This whole idea of wellness sovereignty, which I didn't get to go into as much, is that this is just like powerful medicine to have in your pantry. And you will just reach for it all the more because you made it and you have a lot of it. Whereas if you bought a bottle of it here, you'd feel like you had to save it for some special occasion. When you make a lot of it yourself, you're just going to feel empowered and excited about it, and really, help yourself by taking more of it. So. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, exactly. Those were the only 2 questions in the chat. Okay. I'm leaving it up for another minute or so in case people are trying to get that last minute question squeezed in. But otherwise, thank you all so much for coming tonight. I'm going to switch back to the full screen view so we can see you really big.
I wanted to just pitch for Spoonful Herbals that we're accepting applicants for this year's 6-month-long herbal apprenticeship. We're taking applications till the 5th of April. There's tons of information about it on our website, which is, I think has been listed in several places, and it's on your recipe book here. And we'll try to keep doing these kind of classes. We're making our best effort in this pandemic.
The food processor question.
Oh, the food processor. Yes, the food processor is a savior, especially when you want to make a lot of it. You can, horseradish. So this is the horseradish. This is tough. It's tougher than a carrot. It's tougher than a beet. You have to be careful when you're cutting this stuff. But if I was going to put it in the food processor, I would cut it into like 1-inch chunks and just toss it in there, and voila. All of this, you could put almost, if you wanted to, I would put it all in relatively similar sized chunks. So like, maybe you want to do them separately in the food processor and put them together, but the food processor will save you a lot of time and perhaps fingers.
Someone says, I noticed that you didn't include the mother, I guess that sediment, in the first bottle of vinegar. Was that intentional, or just because it had settled and we didn't shake it?
Yeah, and since I'm making this for Carrie, and like I said, I don't think the mother necessarily survives in there. There's nothing wrong with adding it. I just thought since it was this little sludge, I'd leave it out.
Great. Well, it doesn't look like any other questions have come in. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Kara, for this class. This was great. I love hearing about all this kind of stuff and learning more and running the class at the same time. Thank you all so much for attending. I will send out a survey email tomorrow, and also that link to the Rosemary Gladstar video that we were going to share. Someone asked, do you peel the horseradish?
No, this is organic horseradish. I did cut off some of the, this is a spot that I didn't use, so I didn't cut everything off. I would cut off anything that was really dirty or seemed unhealthy, but otherwise a good scrub. And I'd same with the ginger. I don't peel the ginger. I do peel the onion and the garlic, but I know some people who don't. So
great. Well, you're going to make chutney out of it, so you don't want to eat it.
Yeah, right? If I was making chutney out of it, I wouldn't want all that in there.
Thank you all so much. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, a great rest of your weekend, and thank you all so much for coming. I will let people know when the recording of this is available to go up on our website. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end the event. Have a good one.
Thank you.